Hello and welcome to the talkSPORT YouTube channel. I'm Anna Smith, here to bring you the biggest football stories of the day. I'm joined by our talkSPORT reporter, Ben Jacobs. So Ben, the Premier League is back with a bang this weekend after the international break. There's plenty of new deadline day signings hoping to make an immediate impact. I want to start with Alexander Isak. Obviously, Liverpool have Burnley on Sunday at 2 p.m. What do you think will happen? Should he start? Will he start? And what can we see from him?
Yeah, I think from Liverpool's point of view, they'll be aware that Isak hasn't had a pre-season with them, so there's no guarantee that he'll start that game, but it's a good fixture for him potentially to be involved. He went and played competitive football during the international break, but will be behind other players, not just in terms of his fitness, but integration. So it's not just about, is he physically ready to play for Liverpool? It's also, has he been embedded into that team? Is he aware of the chemistry? And I think given the positive start that Hugo Ekitike has made, it would be a surprise if Isak starts that game. But then if it's not to be that first start, you've got home to Atletico Madrid in the Champions League and then a Merseyside derby at Anfield as well. So either way, Isak is going to be thrown in at the deep end, but this game might just come too soon for him to start. But of course, he'll be in the squad. And I do think it will be a surprise if he doesn't get some form of minutes.
He has played against Burnley twice before and scored twice. So, there could be a third on the way. Obviously, it was the big talking point over the transfer window, wasn't it? How much pressure do you think he is under to kind of hit the ground running?
Well, I don't think pressure necessarily. It's always the case when you have a big price tag that outside scrutiny will be there. But Isak is a seasoned Premier League goal scorer. It's arguably harder for players that come in with big price tags from outside of the Premier League. Florian Wirtz, for example, because he's expected to just replicate the form from the Bundesliga, and that integration might take a little bit longer. But Alexander Isak is a tried and trusted striker. He's constantly scoring goals in all competitions, and Liverpool know exactly what they've got. And that's why I think they'll feel this British transfer record, 125 million, is money well spent. There's other players that have taken 2 seasons to really grow into their price tag. I think Moises Caicedo from within the Premier League and Enzo Fernandez from without it. But with Alexander Isak, I think he'll be quite oblivious to the pressure. He's had a lot of tension, a lot of noise, a lot of stress, a lot of waiting. And I think he'll just be looking to hit the ground running and continuing that Newcastle form at Liverpool. And for me, it will be once again a surprise if he doesn't get 15 plus, if not 20 plus goals in the Premier League this season for Liverpool.
We saw him yesterday as well, training with the some of the Liverpool team for the first time. He looked pretty sharp. How exciting do you think this could be for that Liverpool team?
Yeah, it's insane, really. And there's a few unanswered questions as well. Of course, does Hugo Ekitike go out onto the left-hand side and Arne Slot continue with his favoured formation? Or is there a possibility that we'll see Ekitike and Isak leading the line, which would lean itself towards a 4-4-2? So that will be really telling. And we'll get little glimpses. For example, the first 15 minutes of training ahead of that Champions League game against Atletico Madrid is open. We'll have to wait and see if we can determine any clues. But I think for Alexander Isak, there's a lot of burden that's been removed from his shoulders. He's been waiting so long for this Liverpool move. I don't think anybody really wanted it resolved this long and this late into the window. Clearly, from Newcastle's point of view, they'd have loved to just qualify for the Champions League, have him sign a new deal, draw a line under it, but that was never going to be the case because Isak had asked to leave the club as early as last summer and then again in April. And from Liverpool's perspective, their ideal preference would have been to get him at the same time as Hugo Ekitike at the beginning of August, and then we wouldn't be talking about this whole Isak saga now because he already would have been playing. So this, for me, is about Alexander Isak now being able to focus all of his energy towards football and Liverpool. And when he puts all of that energy towards Liverpool and football, rather than waiting and trying to force a move away from Newcastle United, Premier League defenders are going to have to worry because we all know that Alexander Isak, on form and at his best, is at the moment one of the best strikers in the world.
It does feel like a frightening prospect, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think frightening, and I think just Liverpool being stronger than last season. So what we have to say is that Arsenal had a superb window. Chelsea will be delighted with their window. Manchester City have been a bit hit and miss so far, but if you look at the early part of the window before the Club World Cup, they spent big and brought in some exciting and Premier League season players as well. Ryan Cherky's the one I think that could really get the fan base going. Ryan Ait-Nouri is somebody that should take really well to this Man City system. So it's not just a case of Liverpool have strengthened and nobody else has. But when you think about this Liverpool side being able to seemingly outscore anybody, Ekitike has definitely started very strongly and looks ready for the Premier League. You still feel that Florian Wirtz, there's room to get the best out of him. Add Isak and an instant goal machine. And in my opinion, anyway, Liverpool remain favourites to retain their Premier League title.
You mentioned there, obviously, some of the other sides. We've got a Manchester derby with plenty on the line over the weekend. That's the 4:30 game on Sunday. There was a really interesting article in the Telegraph today from Oliver Brown talking basically about whether Pep Guardiola is at risk of outstaying his welcome, just like he says Arsène Wenger. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different because Pep Guardiola's welcome at Manchester City, bar last season, has been trophy after trophy after trophy. Whereas from Arsenal's point of view under Wenger, they had that incredible invincible season. And then actually the arc was steeply downwards for several seasons where silverware was not delivered. Now I think key to Pep is sorting out the defence. He's been back, let's not forget, in this summer, but also in January. So a lot of money's been spent and he's signed a new deal as well. And my expectation was always that Pep would be more galvanised by failure and more intent to try and put things right. So actually Pep winning, you can almost get into a nonchalant mode. And I think other teams figured out his Man City side and moved ahead of them. But now this is a tactical challenge that I think Pep will really relish. And the whole point of the Club World Cup was supposed to be that they went all the way. It was day one of a new season rather than the final games of an old season. And they set the tone. It didn't happen. They went out to Al Hilal. And I think this season they've shown once again that going forwards, they're electric, even though it's so difficult to replace a player like Kevin De Bruyne. Omar Marmoush and Ryan Cherky will kind of fulfill that role, and Erling Haaland is still there. So when you look at their firepower, it's up there with Liverpool and I think now Arsenal because Eze and Gyökeres has arrived. But in transition and defensively, they still look brittle and weak. And it'll be really interesting as well to see how Donnarumma fits into the system and whether he can lead with the kind of authority to build from the back. And in him, they've obviously got one of the best goalkeepers in the world. So in short, if they can sort out their defence, they're Premier League contenders. If they can't, there'll be a question mark over Pep Guardiola and this brand of Manchester City football that he's not just brought to the Premier League, but has been replicated by others. Look at Enzo Maresca, for example, and Chelsea. But right now, I get no indication that Pep is bored or demotivated or wants to give up or could walk away or would invite himself to be sacked if it's not going according to plan. I actually think that this tactical conundrum of what's happening to my formerly dominant system and how can I solve it is simultaneously what's stopping him from getting any sleep, but what's also getting him up every day in the morning as well. And that's why I think that he'll find a fix, he'll get it right, and Man City is still not to be discounted this season.
100%. It's obviously not just pressure on him though as well on the game this weekend. Ruben Amorim, obviously they've had a bit of a challenging start to the season, especially with that loss to Grimsby in the Carabao Cup. What do you think you'll see from Manchester United this weekend?
Yeah, I think Manchester United will try and make a statement as they did against Arsenal if they put in a similar performance, even though they lost that game. It's going to be a very competitive Manchester derby. It'll be really intriguing to see whether Benjamin Sesko gets the opportunity to start and lead the line. And because Matheus Cunha and Mason Mount are injured, there's again huge pressure for output on another new signing, Bryan Mbeumo, and of course the captain, Bruno Fernandes, as well. And it's a strange Manchester derby because usually when we have these kind of games, you think about the threats up top. But for me, it's once again going to be about two defences that are susceptible and which back line and particularly centre-backs can be solid enough to either keep a clean sheet or only let in a small amount of goals. So it might actually be won by the defences rather than the attacks. And then I think the bigger picture for Manchester United is just finding this chemistry. So it's unfortunate that Cunha's out for at least a few weeks, but Mbumo needs to get going. And then the very interesting conversation, debate will be around the goalkeeper situation. How much can we read into the selection in the Manchester derby between the sticks by Ruben Amorim? Nana's gone off to Turkey. The expectation is maybe that Bayındır starts the game, and that might not give us as much intel because it could just be an indication that new signing Sene Lammens hasn't had enough time to bed in. But of course, on the flip side, if Lammens is thrown straight in, then it's obvious that he is the number one, and from day one, straight into the deep end, a debut in a Manchester derby. And that is a tough gig for any goalkeeper, but particularly a number one at Manchester United. So usually I'd be looking at all the different attackers, especially because Manchester United have added some of their own, and thinking maybe we're going to get a box office open game in transition with a whole lot of goals. But I actually think both managers will be looking to try and be defensive to keep that clean sheet. And this might be a Manchester derby that's only won by a single goal. So I'm intrigued to see how both sides approach it. And like I say, in particular, looking forward to see who Ruben Amorim picks between the sticks.
It's definitely going to be an exciting weekend. It does feel like it's so early on the season, wasn't it, to have that international break, but so much to look forward to. We've obviously also had the first sacking of the season. So a big game on Saturday, the early game, 12:30, Arsenal Forest, with Ange Postecoglou back in management already. What about that?
Yeah, it's just one of those quirks of fate that the former Spurs manager would begin at Arsenal, and we all know what kind of reception he's going to get there. I think it's the right appointment. What we mustn't forget is Nuno Espirito Santo was one of the best managers in the Premier League last season, but sometimes managers go because they're not seen as the right strategic fit if we remove football from the equation. And I think it was obvious that there was an untenable situation between Marinakis, the owner, and Nuno, but also, and perhaps more importantly, Edu and Nuno, who fell out over the summer. And as a consequence, if you look at the recruitment plan and the overall strategy, manager and owner and manager and club were not on the same page. Postecoglou is the opposite. He plays completely different brand of football. And my sense is some of these late window signings were made knowing a change would be made because they are quite Postecoglou players. Amari Hutchinson, for example, should fit very well into a Postecoglou system. And the beauty for Nottingham Forest is that even though they've got an arduous season with Europa League football, they do now have a big enough squad to allow Postecoglou to rotate. And Hutchinson, for example, isn't even in the Europa League squad. So this is clearly a difficult game for Postecoglou. He's not going to be judged on match one. Arsenal are the heavy favourites. They're looking good on paper and in practice this season. And I would expect Arsenal to win the game, but I think Postecoglou will be seen as a very good fit for Nottingham Forest. I think that he'll be capable of taking them on an exciting run through Europe, having won the Europa League last season with Tottenham. And then I'm just going to be really interested to see how he balances a big squad and how he keeps all of his players happy. But on balance, I think it just suited all parties for Nuno to go. And Postecoglou's brand of football is one that Nottingham Forest fans can be very excited about, even though I sense he'll start with a loss at Arsenal this weekend.
You mentioned there that brand. He spoke yesterday, didn't he, about the fact that, he knows that that's how he plays football and that's what he wants to do. Do you think there will be a massive shift in the way that Forest are setting up in games?
A huge shift. I mean, Ange Ball is often a transition. Whoever he replaces, you think of Conte to Ange at Spurs and now Nuno to Ange, very different. It will be attack-minded, it will be gung-ho, it will have a high line. But as I say, I think some of these players signed en masse during the summer are almost Ange signings because it's clear in hindsight that it was going to be over between Nuno and Nottingham Forest much earlier than the sacking itself. So Ange has got a lot of options, a lot of weapons, a lot of versatility that he can use. And it's just a case of the players ultimately learning the system. It takes a little bit of time, but it's always exciting from day one. Win, lose or draw, Ange football is very easy on the eye, even if it can be prone to errors or frustrating to watch at the same time. And I think for Marinakis, the whole Ange hire, much like Edu's hire as global head of football, is not just about Nottingham Forest. It's also about trying to replicate a consistent and easy on the eye and attack-minded style across all of Marinakis' multi-club portfolio. So a similar synergy between Olympiacos and Nottingham Forest. And let's not forget, a Brazilian club is expected to be added as well. So Ange feels not just like a Forest hire, but a project hire as well. And I think that was part of the motivation also in bringing Edu to the football club as well. So this is a new era for Nottingham Forest. There'll be a connection between other clubs. And I do think that Ange Postecoglou will prove a good hire, but we should definitely spare a thought and be empathetic towards Nuno as well, because regardless of the circumstances of his exit, he did a fantastic job at Nottingham Forest.
Do you think we'll see him back somewhere else soon?
Yeah, I think he'll be in demand. I mean, I never like to speculate when managers are still in situ, but it's obvious that there are other managers in the Premier League between now and maybe the festive period that their futures might be called into question. The most interesting one is Graham Potter and West Ham United, but he was back late in the window as well, and they got a superb win away at Nottingham Forest by 3-0, and Lucas Paqueta stayed and Mateus Fernandes has arrived. So maybe Graham Potter gets a little bit more time, but I think Nuno will bide his time. It's always difficult to walk into a club mid-season, but if there is another Premier League vacancy between now and the end of the year, I would imagine that whoever that club is, Nuno will be one of the names that's high in his thinking, because he's not left Nottingham Forest because he's done a bad job. He's left Nottingham Forest because he wasn't a fit.
Absolutely. Fascinating to watch. Ben Jacobs, thank you so much for joining me.
Always a pleasure.